Hello there and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Ollie Barrett. Thanks for joining us. We've got the latest coming up on stories developing around the world. We'll start with the headlines. Poland's defence minister warns the crisis on the Belarusian border could last for months or even years, a day after Polish forces fired tear gas and deployed water cannon to deter migrants seeking to enter the EU. A Russian-brokered ceasefire seems to be being respected at the Armenia Azerbaijan border after clashes between the neighbours left 8 dead and sparked fears of another flare-up in their territorial dispute. New Delhi shuts down schools until further notice due to dangerous levels of air pollution, while residents of Pakistan's Lahore plead with officials to take action over the acrid smog engulfing their city. US pharmaceutical giant Pfizer says its prospective antiviral COVID-19 pill will be made available more cheaply in the world's least wealthy countries, subject to it passing ongoing trials and regulatory approval. Argentina becomes the second team from South America to qualify for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. The two-time world champions go through after playing out a tense draw with rivals Brazil on home turf in San Juan. And an 86-year-old great-grandmother is crowned Miss Holocaust Survivor in an annual Israeli beauty pageant designed to honour women who survived the horrors of the Nazi genocide. We'll start here in the UK, where it is a day of potential jeopardy for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Today, after the weekly Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons, he'll then face a parliamentary grilling over charges of sleaze within his party. MPs on Parliament's cross-party select committees will quiz Johnson to take stock of government policy. These sessions are typically held 3 times a year. For Boris Johnson, this is the 6th session since becoming Prime Minister in mid-2019. Allegations of sleaze in his Conservative Party will feature, as will how the behaviour of MPs should be policed. We can cross now to London correspondent Benji Hire for more. And Benji, first of all, talk us through exactly how today plays out, because there's a lot going on.
There is, Ollie. Following a fortnight of pretty uncomfortable headlines for this government, which has led to the resignation of one MP already. This is due to be another pretty difficult day for the Prime Minister. As you mentioned, he faces questions in the House of Commons, firstly in Prime Minister's questions against the leader of the opposition Labour Party. He's then in front of that liaison committee looking specifically at propriety and ethics in government, before an evening with his party backbenchers and his colleagues there likely to be raging at how his proposals, his plans, might be leaving them out of pocket. You could recall that all of this kind of stems from an incident with one particular former minister, Owen Paterson, who was found to have breached lobbying rules, and instead of resigning immediately, there was a concerted effort by Number 10 to try to amend the investigation process. That didn't quite go to plan. There was a U-turn about 24 hours afterwards, and that's landed Downing Street in the situation we have now, with a quite difficult couple of hours ahead for the Prime Minister.
And Boris Johnson's proposed reforms, the latest proposed reforms to the MP's standard system and the proposed changes to rules over second jobs for lawmakers, what exactly is he now suggesting?
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Johnson's plan specifically looking at a ban on MPs accepting paid work as parliamentary advisors, strategists or consultants. He goes on to add that he wants a new rule that MPs outside work should be within reasonable limits and should not prevent them from fully carrying out their range of duties that they would normally be expected to do as an MP. But within that, no specific details as to what exactly that means in terms of what jobs they can and can't do. You'd assume, for example, that if you want to do extra shifts as a doctor, then that's pretty allowable. What about if you wanted to, for example, work for a private company and give them advice there? That's not quite parliamentary advice, but it is still a second job. So that needs definite clarifying from the government. But the opposition fears that a lot of this is kind of going to be kicked into the long grass, that this could go on for weeks on weeks on end. There's still no exact timeline as to when this would be brought in. And again, there needs to be questions answered as to which specific jobs would be covered, or whether, in effect, MPs would still be allowed to take jobs at private companies, as dozens currently do.
Well, you touched on it there, Benji. What are the opposition Labour Party saying about Boris Johnson's proposals? Because weren't they suggesting something pretty similar? And we have a vote today as well.
Officially, yes, they were proposing something similar, so much that the government's line is that they're going further than Labour's proposals. But the Labour Party's leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has been pretty firm on this recently. He said that he wants a ban on all second jobs for MPs with very limited exceptions. So he's arguing that he's going even further and that the government are not actually doing enough. A lot of that will be kind of fought out in the debate in the next couple of hours. But what Boris Johnson also has to contend with is opposition not from the benches where the Labour MPs sit, but also his own. As I mentioned at the start, he has that meeting later this afternoon with parliamentarians from his own party, and it's there where a number of his own MPs, many of whom have been alleged to have worked for different companies, will be asking specifically which jobs will be permitted and not. And there seems to be this sort of rift, this divide in the party between older traditionalists who maybe see it as kind of more tolerable to go about their work as an MP and also get some money on the side taking another job, and younger MPs newly elected who feel passionately about representing their constituents. And he needs to really make sure that bridge is divided so that he has the full support of his own party.
OK, Benji, thank you. That's Benji Hire reporting from London. Next to Europe's eastern border, where thousands of migrants are stuck. Hoping for a better future, they travelled from conflicts and problems in their own countries, but have become pawns in a geopolitical conflict. On Tuesday, Polish security forces turned water cannons on migrants who pelted stones and threw debris at border guards. One Syrian teenager's funeral illustrates the increasing levels of desperation.
This is a moment of sadness for the loved ones of a teenager who left Syria only to die on the European Union's doorstep. The funeral's being hosted by volunteers and streamed back home by phone. He's telling them, "I know you wanted to see him for one last time, but there's not much they can do." Ahmed Al-Hassan is said to have drowned in a river, one more casualty as the EU-Belarus border crisis continues to spiral. On Tuesday, Polish authorities turned water cannon on crowds of migrants at one crossing who threw rocks and bottles and other debris back. The Polish government says a police officer is believed to have a fractured skull. There are thousands of migrants on the border, and like this may not stop anytime soon. The Polish government says it's preparing for a scenario where this goes on for months and may need to launch formal discussions with its allies in NATO. It says it's had to deploy 20,000 in reinforcements from the police, border guard, and army. Poland and the EU are continuing their claim that the crisis is being orchestrated by Belarus to destabilize them, which Belarus denies. The Iraqi government has also now become involved. Baghdad says it's trying to organize flights for Iraqis in the Belarus capital to come back and has already booked up to 200 people to return. Back at the funeral, the volunteers, a local Muslim community, are preparing for the worst. They say with winter coming, they're gathering as much food and clothing as they can to prevent more funerals from occurring.
After months of deadly clashes over Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed to a ceasefire at their border. Armenia's defense ministry says that in an agreement mediated by the Russian side, there is a ceasefire and the situation on the ground is relatively stable. Russia had urged both countries to step back from confrontation. The Kremlin said the Russian President Vladimir Putin called the Armenian Prime Minister to discuss the situation. The Russian defense minister reportedly also spoke to the Armenian and Azeri defense ministers by phone. The contested Nagorno-Karabakh region is at the heart of a decades-long armed standoff between the two neighbours. The status of the region's been disputed since at least 1918, when Armenia and Azerbaijan became independent from the Russian Empire. The two countries waged a war for 6 weeks last year over the territory, which claimed over 6,500 lives. That conflict ended in November of last year, also with a Russian-brokered ceasefire. The agreement saw Armenia cede territories it had controlled for decades to Azerbaijan. Next to Sri Lanka, where thousands of people have taken to the streets of the capital city, Colombo, to protest against worsening economic conditions. There are shortages of fuel and essential goods. The protests were led by the country's main opposition party, the United People's Force. The opposition blames the economic crisis on President Rajapaksa's government, and it came as the Sri Lankan parliament debated the national budget for 2022. Protesters say Rajapaksa's policies have resulted in dwindling foreign reserves, high food prices and shortages of essential goods like cooking gas and fuel. The opposition also blames the government's decision to steer the country toward organic farming and ban chemical fertilizer imports for creating a food crisis.
People are unable to feed for themselves. Mothers and children are suffering from malnutrition. The industrial sector has completely collapsed. Unemployment is a rising issue. There are huge shortages of essential goods.
According to the World Bank, Sri Lanka's foreign reserves reduced to only 2 months' worth of imports in August, and the local rupee currency depreciated 7.4% against the US dollar in the first 8 months of 2021. The Sri Lankan government tried price controls and declared a state of emergency, but that's so far failed to keep price rises under control or stop hoarding. WION correspondent Dasuni Athauda reports now from Colombo.
Thousands of protesters gathered near the Golfest roundabout last evening for the protest march that was organised by the main opposition party in Sri Lanka, the Samagi Janabala Vegaya, to voice their protest against the present government and its failure to deliver election promises. Now, just yesterday we did see police from across the country preventing certain protesters from other districts from entering Colombo. However, towards the evening, a massive crowd of protesters was seen at the Golfest roundabout. That's not all. Day before yesterday, health guidelines were revised once again, preventing mass protests and gatherings from taking place until further notice. However, this protest did take place with a large number of protesters that was seen to have gathered in Colombo. Health authorities do say that this might lead to an unnecessary rise in COVID-19 cases. And that's the latest from here in Colombo. Reporting for WION World is One, I'm Dasni Athauda.
Just 3 minutes apart, two deadly bombing attacks have shaken the heart of the Ugandan city of Kampala. 3 suicide bombers killed at least 3 victims and sent members of parliament running for cover. The first attack took place near the central police station and the second very close to the country's parliament. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the suicide bombings.
Three suicide bombers killed civilians and injured dozens in Uganda's capital, Kampala, on Tuesday. One carried out the first blast near a checkpoint at the central police station. Then 2 other bombers on motorbikes detonated near Pont. The explosions saw lawmakers rush for cover and cars burst into flames, according to media reports. Bloodied office workers were sent scrambling over shards of broken glass as a plume of white smoke rose above the downtown area. A Reuters witness saw burned cars behind a police cordon at the scene, and a local television reporter said he saw bodies in the street. Here's local city mayor Salim Uhuru.
Very unfortunate to see. I've lost one of my friends, a police officer, and the rest, the police will come and give more information about that, but it's very unfortunate. It's happening such a time that we're trying to go back to our normal livelihoods. So if these people can come at such a process of police and set off a bomb, then you know things are not good.
A Ugandan military spokesperson told Reuters that there had been multiple blasts and multiple casualties, but declined to give further details. Uganda's police did not respond to initial requests for comment. The bombs are the latest string of attacks over the last month. No particular group immediately claimed responsibility for these explosions. The Al-Qaeda-linked Somali insurgent group Al-Shabaab has previously carried out deadly attacks in the country. Last month, another group, the Islamic State-aligned Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, claimed its first attack there, a bomb packed with shrapnel that killed a restaurant waitress. Both the ADF and Al-Shabaab frequently use explosive devices and have been accused of killing thousands of civilians.
Prized for their milk, meat and also as a means of transport, camels are at the heart of the Somali traditional life and economy. But millions of herders are giving up that traditional life, moving to cities to flee hunger and poverty. The changing climate is adding to their woes, forcing them to travel long distances for water and grazing.
Ali Abdi Almi is always on the lookout for grass for his camels in Somalia's desert. After hours on foot, there's nothing better than a drink of fresh camel milk.
I drink camel milk because it's nourishing. The milk is good for us because camels graze from trees with medicinal properties that help fight diseases. I have 5 children and we all depend on camel milk to survive.
Camels mean life for Almi. They are his transport, and their meat and milk are food and income. The animals are immensely important here. In Somalia, camels mean status. This cattle market manager explains.
Camels are very important in Somali culture because someone is considered rich or can rise in social status according to the number of camels he has.
There are 7 million camels, almost 1 for every 2 Somalis. Beyond status, they are a valuable investment. A healthy camel can sell for up to $1,000. But only a few people can afford them. 7 out of 10 people live in poverty, according to the World Bank. To make things worse, rain is becoming scarcer, making it difficult for herders.
As a breeder, I have to face many difficulties. I am facing drought and famine, which has consequences. My fellow rangers and I have lost a lot of camels and cattle.
The changing climate in the Horn of Africa has forced nomads to travel farther for water and grazing. There was a cyclone at the end of 2020 and several droughts. Repeated natural disasters have decimated thousands of camels and other livestock. Now pastoralists are giving up trying. Millions have moved to the cities, trying to flee hunger and desperation.
86-year-old Selina Steinfeld's been crowned Miss Holocaust survivor in an annual Israeli beauty pageant. The competition honours women who endured the horrors of the Nazi genocide.
An 86-year-old great-grandmother was crowned Miss Holocaust survivor on Tuesday in an annual Israeli beauty pageant designed to honor women who endured the horrors of the Nazi genocide. 10 contestants, ranging in age from 79 to 90, dressed to the nines and with full hair and makeup, walked the catwalk in Jerusalem. Organizers of the contest, which was cancelled last year due to the coronavirus pandemic, say it bestows glamour and respect on a dwindling number of Jewish women whose youth was stolen during World War II, but who went on to build new lives in Israel. Contestant Cuca Palmon, who survived a massacre in her native Romania, lives to tell her story.
What I went through as a Holocaust survivor, I would never dream that I can get to this position with an extensive family where I have 2 kids, 4 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. And I am here in this great age, 87. This is a godly thing. It is indescribable.
Tuesday's winner, Selina Steinfeld, was also born in Romania, where she survived Nazi attacks before moving to Israel in 1948. Other contestants included a woman born in Yugoslavia who survived a concentration camp in modern-day Croatia. Some critics and survivors worry the event cheapens the memory of the million Jews killed by the Nazis. One woman, whose grandmother competed on Tuesday, disputed that point of view, arguing that the contestants, quote, deserve that everyone see how much beauty there is in these women who went through such horror.
Now, it may be mid-November, but it is beginning to look a lot like Christmas here in London. With the holiday season just around the corner, there are more than 1 million LEDs twinkling across the centre of the city. Usually Oxford Street unveils its Christmas lights first, but this year 20 streets across the West End, including Regent Street, Bond Street and parts of Mayfair and Piccadilly, all lit up in sync for what was the biggest switch-on in the world. We will leave you with those images. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Ollie Barrett, or Holly Barrett at this time of year. We'll be sparkling for you at the same time tomorrow.
Christmas lights are a really important part of the West End for Christmas. Everybody looks forward to seeing them. It's that moment when Christmas begins in the West End, so it's something for everybody to get behind.
I think all the lights give me like proper like Christmas vibe and spirit, like Christmas spirit. Yeah, it makes you feel a bit more like festive, especially after like this past year. It's nice to just see everything like get back together.
I don't spend that much time on the street because in winter temperatures are even lower. So yeah, I feel that Christmas and decorations encourage people to get out and visit the city.
After work, just walking down Piccadilly or Oxford, just see the lights. After like a pretty exhausting day, it puts you in a good mood and just walking around instead of going home. So it's a nice thing to do.
This is right, Arab.